You work hard for every harvest. Every morning in the field, every drop of water measured, every seed sown with the hope that it will feed a family and return value to your land. You depend on the health of your soil, the silent foundation beneath your boots, to sustain that effort. But what if I told you that certain fruits, commonly grown across small and mid-scale farms, are quietly degrading your land's productivity? What if, in striving to grow what sells, you're planting crops that sap your soil's strength, trigger long-term micronutrient loss, and damage future yields? You don't see the damage immediately. That's the risk. Some of the most vibrant, fast-selling fruits, the ones customers love, are among the worst offenders for your farm's future resilience. They may thrive above ground, but below the surface, they extract more than they return. They destabilize soil structure, pull essential minerals without replenishment, and in some cases, even disrupt the growth of nearby crops by altering microbial balance or attracting pests that linger long after the harvest. For farmers over 60, the consequences can be particularly challenging. You're already balancing physical limitations, rising input costs, and climate unpredictability. You need crops that reward your labor, not ones that quietly punish it year after year. This isn't about avoiding fruit altogether. It's about understanding which specific fruits pose risks to your land health, and why. Let's take strawberries, for example. They're a favorite among market vendors and consumers alike. But if you've been growing strawberries in the same patch for more than 3 seasons, your soil is likely suffering. Strawberry roots excrete phenolic compounds, natural byproducts that accumulate in the rhizosphere. Over time, these compounds suppress microbial diversity in the soil and disrupt beneficial fungi that your plants depend on for nutrient uptake. You might notice yields decreasing despite your best efforts. That's not poor luck. It's a chemical imbalance induced by repeated monoculture without proper soil rest or rotation. And that's just one crop. Now consider melons, particularly watermelon and cantaloupe. These fruits are heavy feeders. That means they pull significant amounts of potassium, magnesium, and boron from the soil. If you're harvesting full beds of melon 2 or 3 times in a season without aggressive composting and trace mineral supplementation, your field may be slipping into a state of subclinical nutrient depletion. It won't show up in the first yield, but over time, you'll see it: lower fruit density, thin rinds, higher pest susceptibility, and a gradual shift in pH. You may even notice that your cover crops no longer thrive where they once did. Many farmers misinterpret this decline as aging soil, but it's not inevitable. It's reversible. And it often starts with removing or rotating out crops that exhaust more than they give. Grapes present another challenge. While grapes themselves don't deplete soil rapidly, the way we tend to grow them, especially in tight monoculture rows, promotes compaction and fungal buildup. Vines, once established, tend to stay in the same space for years, which reduces the opportunity for soil aeration and organic turnover. Without consistent cover cropping and subsoil fracturing, grape beds become hardened and oxygen deprived. Over time, root fungi such as Armillaria or Fusarium can take hold and spread into adjacent beds. For a farmer with aging knees or limited labor support, reworking a grape bed gone bad is more than a chore. It's a costly, physically draining project that eats into future seasons. Then there are citrus trees, lemons, oranges, and mandarins. Popular, profitable, but often mismanaged in small-scale farms. The issue isn't the fruit, but the chemical strategy used to protect them. Citrus attracts scale insects, which in turn require aggressive spraying. The result: repeated applications of systemic insecticides and soil drenches that collapse beneficial nematode populations and reduce earthworm density. Once you lose that underground workforce, you lose more than yield. You lose long-term soil structure, water infiltration capacity, and natural nutrient cycling. And no fertilizer can fully replace that. You've spent a lifetime building your field's profile. Losing that to a few seasons of chemically dependent citrus isn't a risk worth taking. In the northern zones, blueberries can be a silent threat. They require acidic soil, pH below 5.5, and to maintain that, most farmers rely on heavy sulfur amendments. But over time, especially in lighter sandy soils, this leads to aluminum toxicity. Root tips begin to die back. Neighboring crops struggle. Your soil biology turns selective and brittle. And here's the catch: Blueberries don't show stress until the second or third year of imbalance. By the time you see signs, the recovery is no longer quick. It may take 3 years to rebuild what you didn't know you were losing. As you think about your own land, your own routine, walking the same rows, kneeling by the same trellis, clearing the same weeds, you begin to realize that the choices you've made year after year become visible in the ground itself. Certain fruits are not just harvests, they are legacies. And if you choose poorly, that legacy becomes harder to pass on. You may love the income a fruit provides, but if it comes at the cost of your land's integrity, of your own physical labor year after year, is it really a gain? Some problems don't show themselves in the fruit. They show in the field after the harvest is done, when you return the next season and the soil doesn't respond the way it used to. When water sits longer, when weeds take hold faster, when once reliable yields begin to shrink without a clear explanation. Often, these are symptoms of a deeper shift, a loss of organic balance, caused by the very crops you've come to rely on. Let's return to melons, specifically watermelon, which has become a symbol of summer success. For large-scale operations, this fruit may seem profitable, especially during hot season demand. But it's important to understand the underlying cost. Watermelon roots grow shallow and wide, often competing with neighboring plants for nutrients within the top 12 inches of soil. When over-farmed, these plants deplete upper-layer nutrients rapidly and compact the surface due to harvesting machinery or human traffic concentrated across narrow rows. The result? Poor tilth, reduced water infiltration, and a decline in soil aeration. You may notice crusting on the surface after a rain, or find that your compost teas and fertilizers aren't penetrating as deeply as they once did. For older farmers, particularly those who can no longer double dig or rework compacted beds easily, this is more than a nuisance. It's a slow erosion of field productivity that requires either machinery you may not have or rest years you can't afford. Papayas, though often grown in warmer zones and in smaller orchard plots, can also harm long-term soil resilience. They're fast-growing and nutrient-hungry, requiring generous nitrogen and potassium, particularly during flowering. But they also demand near constant water, and shallow, wet soils are a breeding ground for fungal root rot and bacterial wilt. More critically, papaya trees exude phytotoxins, natural chemicals that suppress certain weed species but also hinder neighboring vegetable crops if grown nearby. In mixed farming systems, where papayas share land with annual vegetables, their allelopathic compounds can cause yield drops in sensitive plants like lettuce, spinach, and beans. These interactions are subtle, and most growers only notice after years of unexplained stunting or poor germination. The real danger lies in assuming your soil is poor, when in fact it has become chemically unbalanced by root zone contamination. This kind of slow interference is often overlooked, but for older farmers managing limited acreage, it can result in the loss of entire beds without any obvious warning. Even mango trees, beloved for their hardiness and high market value, come with hidden risks. Mango roots are deep and aggressive, and they tend to leach calcium and magnesium from subsoil layers. Over time, this depletes buffer minerals that help stabilize soil pH. As the subsoil becomes increasingly acidic, trace elements like iron and manganese become more soluble and in high concentrations, toxic to plant roots. For a younger grower with ample equipment and soil test budgets, this may be manageable. But for older growers who rely on intuition, tradition, and physical observation, pH drift often goes undetected until chlorosis, stunted growth, or debak appear across crops planted in former mango zones. By then, reversing the damage is not a matter of adding lime. It's a matter of rebuilding soil layers that took decades to form. That's not something easily done with aging hands and finite labor. Pineapples bring a different concern, one centered around pest cycles. These fruits thrive in acidic, sandy soils and are often cultivated in monocultures with black plastic mulch. While this helps control weeds and warm the soil, it creates an anaerobic root environment over time. Worse, pineapple farming encourages a buildup of mealybugs and root-feeding nematodes, which are notoriously difficult to eradicate. If you've noticed root galls, twisted foliage, or poor nutrient uptake in crops planted after pineapples, this is likely the reason. Unfortunately, many smallholder farmers replant without fully fumigating or solarizing the soil, allowing pest cycles to continue uninterrupted. Older growers, in particular, are vulnerable to long-term land loss from this kind of infestation, especially if the pests migrate beyond the pineapple bed into vegetables, herbs, or tubers nearby. Avocados have exploded in popularity, and some small farms are tempted to dedicate space to them. But avocados are water-demanding trees with root systems that require perfect drainage. They are especially sensitive to phytophthorochinamome, an aggressive root rot fungus that thrives in compacted or poorly drained soils. Once this fungus takes hold, it spreads rapidly through water channels, infecting neighboring fruit trees and undermining even well-established perennials. Moreover, avocado orchards typically require a significant investment in mulching, pruning, and spacing, labor-intensive practices that may be too demanding for older farmers managing land with minimal help. And when these trees fail, they fail suddenly, with entire limbs dying back within a week, leaving years of effort lost. If you're over 60 and managing a farm by experience, not spreadsheets, this kind of high-risk investment can threaten not just a harvest, but your health, your finances, and your will to keep farming. In all of these cases, what makes these fruits so dangerous isn't just what they demand from the soil. It's that they rarely give anything back. Unlike legumes or rotational grains, which fix nitrogen or allow for soil rest, these heavy takers create extraction cycles. They weaken microbial networks. They strip nutrients. They introduce chemical or fungal stress that can take years to unwind. But these crops remain popular and profitable because their damage is slow and quiet. The land doesn't scream when it's out of balance. It whispers, and unless you're trained to hear it, the warning signs blend into the background of a busy season. If you're like most older farmers, you don't have unlimited energy to fight against uncooperative soil. You need it to work with you, to support your pace, and to reward your decades of knowledge. Growing the wrong fruits can erase that advantage, leaving you tired, frustrated, and stuck in a cycle of doing more for less. This doesn't mean you must abandon fruit altogether, but it does mean rethinking which ones belong on your land, based not just on yield or taste, but on their long-term impact. A wise farmer knows not only how to grow, but what not to grow. And in your later farming years, that wisdom can protect your soil, your strength, and your future. The land is a living memory. Everything you've planted, every harvest you've gathered, leaves a mark. Some crops enrich the soil, making future seasons more forgiving. Others strip it of balance, leaving behind the burden of recovery. As a grower with decades behind you, you understand that the health of your land is inseparable from the health of your body, your energy, and your future as a farmer. So the question becomes clear: how do you move forward? How do you maintain productivity without exhausting the very soil you rely on, especially now, when every physical task must be calculated and every hour of labor must count? The first answer lies in crop rotation based on soil contribution. If you've been growing nutrient-exhaustive fruits like strawberries, melons, or papayas, it's time to integrate balancing crops not just between seasons, but within them. Legumes like cowpeas, alfalfa, or clover fix atmospheric nitrogen, enrich root zones with microbial activity, and help restructure compacted soil. Even a short cover season between fruiting cycles can prevent long-term degradation. For example, after pulling strawberries, instead of replanting immediately, sow a green manure crop that breaks pest cycles and restores microbial diversity. Alfalfa, in particular, penetrates deep into the soil and helps loosen lower layers, a process that becomes more valuable as physical tilling becomes harder with age. The second strategy is re-evaluating perennial plantings. Trees and vines are attractive to older farmers because they offer passive income with less seasonal replanting. But not all perennials are equal. Rather than choosing high-maintenance species like mango or avocado, consider more regenerative systems: mulberry, fig, or jujube, for example. These trees are resilient, less prone to root diseases, and generally require fewer chemical inputs. Their leaves also compost well, returning nutrients to the earth without artificial fertilizers. For farmers who want to transition into a lighter physical role, perhaps focusing more on maintenance than active harvesting, these trees offer a sensible alternative. Their yield may be modest, but their cost on the land and on your own strength is far lower. Next, you must begin to listen to your soil, not just through feel and intuition, but through diagnostics. Soil testing may feel like a modern distraction, but in reality, it's a tool that extends your legacy. Knowing exactly what's missing allows you to intervene early, with precision. For older farmers with limited mobility or equipment, this means fewer wasted inputs, fewer failed plantings, and far less guesswork. If you've grown crops that are known to deplete micronutrients, like watermelon depleting potassium or blueberries shifting pH, the test tells you how deep the damage goes. From there, targeted amendments like rock dust, humates, or specific compost blends can begin to reverse the trend. It's worth noting that rebuilding soil is not about one dramatic act, it's about small, consistent choices. For instance, if you struggle to spread heavy compost, switch to compost teas or bioactive foliar sprays. These low-effort solutions bring microbial life back to the leaf surface and root zone without needing wheelbarrows or tractors. Another principle to embrace: diversity protects soil longevity. Growing too much of a single fruit, especially one with a heavy nutrient footprint, creates monoculture fatigue. Instead, interplanting fruits with herbs, flowers, or legumes reduces pest pressure, attracts pollinators, and limits nutrient depletion in any one area. For example, basil and marigold grown between melon rows not only deter pests like aphids and beetles, but also provide ground cover that preserves soil moisture. This lightens your irrigation load, a benefit to aging joints and tight budgets alike. Similarly, interplanting nitrogen-fixing crops near fruit trees gives you a steady infusion of root zone fertility without lifting a shovel. Let's also talk about how you harvest. As age sets in, physical strength becomes more precious, and soil can suffer when overcompensating with tools or machinery. Instead of large-scale, high-impact harvesting, consider a segmented approach. Divide your fruit plots into smaller zones and rotate harvest days to reduce soil compaction. Equip yourself with ergonomic tools that reduce bending and strain, not only for your safety, but to minimize trampling root zones. You may also wish to involve local youth or neighbors in labor exchange systems. Many older farmers find renewed vitality not by doing it all alone, but by teaching and delegating, sharing wisdom, not just weight. In doing so, you preserve your land while preserving yourself. Most importantly, revisit your mindset about success. If a crop weakens your soil, causes recurring pest problems, or demands more of your body than it gives back, it's not success, it's erosion disguised as profit. Shifting your production model, even slightly, to prioritize soil health over short-term yield is not giving up. It is farming with foresight. You've likely spent a lifetime understanding the difference between action and reaction. A good farmer acts with purpose, anticipating outcomes. A struggling farmer is forced to react, season after season, to problems that could have been prevented. At your age, with your knowledge, you have earned the right to act wisely, not work endlessly. This may mean transitioning a portion of your land into regenerative systems. It may mean reducing fruit rows and expanding fallow cover seasons. It may even mean phasing out crops that have served you well financially but punished your soil quietly. These decisions are not admissions of weakness, they are acts of stewardship. Your land is not a machine, it responds to care. When you shift to fruits that cooperate with soil biology rather than dominate it, you find that everything else becomes lighter. Your irrigation becomes simpler, your disease pressure drops, your yields become more consistent, and your body feels less burdened. This is especially vital in your 60s, 70s, and beyond, when your time, energy, and health must be preserved like the very nutrients in your soil. You no longer farm just to produce. You farm to continue, to hand off, to maintain dignity and purpose. You may be asking, is it too late to change? The answer is no. One season of poor soil can be followed by a season of rebuilding. A damaged field can recover. So can a weary farmer. Farming after 60 requires more than endurance, it requires wisdom. The fruits you grow are not just for markets. They shape the future of your land, your legacy, and your own health. By avoiding fruits that deplete your soil and shifting toward crops that build strength both in the ground and in your body, you're doing more than making a living. You're preserving the life of your farm. You deserve to work with soil that gives back. You deserve harvests that come not at the expense of your energy, but in harmony with it. So take the time to assess what you grow and why. Choose crops that match your pace. Listen to the land and let it reward you for your care. That is how strong fields and strong farmers are made. And if you know another grower facing the same quiet struggles, share this message, because the land remembers how it is treated, and so will those who walk it after you're gone.